You are listening to Spotlight Sessions with Justin Bamforth. The program provides an inside look at the creative field through exclusive conversations with industry professionals. Every episode is recorded live each month in the Adobe Creative Career Discord. Check out the show links to learn more and join for free, or visit adobediscord.com and click on Adobe Creative Career. This episode was previously recorded before a live listening audience. Before we begin, a quick note. The views and opinions expressed by today's guest are solely their own and do not represent those of Microsoft, its partners, or affiliates. Tonight's guest is my brother, Sean Bamforth, who has spent his career working in sales for the finance and tech industry for the past 15 years. Now, Sean has worked for predominantly large enterprises like Fidelity, E-Trade, Merrill Edge, Santander, and Oracle, and supported all types of businesses from small to large organizations. He supported nearly all of these from a consultant role, specifically on sales, and he's required to learn many different things, from business to industry trends to technology, and essentially the practical applications of its use. But today, Sean works for Microsoft as a data, apps, and AI specialist. But tonight, he joins us live on Spotlight Sessions. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thank you. You sure know how to put lipstick on a pig.
All right, well, why don't you give them just a brief overview of what you currently do at Microsoft?
Yeah, so my work and talents go into a lot of different fields and areas, and sometimes I do work with people specifically within creative spaces, but sometimes that get classified as a sales strategy. So if you want to tune out, now's the time. But what I will say is that, long story short, I work with medium to large and small enterprises or organizations, sometimes nonprofit or government sector. And I, just as Justin Bamforth had shared, I work alongside to understand their business, really understand what their goals are, long-term, short-term goals, and help them achieve those goals with the technology that Microsoft provides, and specifically within the Azure platform, encompassing data, artificial intelligence, and applications.
There you go.
Is everyone asleep yet? Are we good? We're done?
That's it. That's the interview. I'd like to thank my guest, Sean Bamforth, for his riveting talk tonight. No, I think it's important because when you first went off to college, Sean, you didn't set your sights on a career in sales, correct?
No.
So how on earth did you end up in sales, and what initially attracted to it? Give us the origin story.
Yeah, I mean, think about it, right? When we sit here, how many of the listeners or anybody really in general starts their life off and says, well, gee golly, I want to be a salesman. I want to be a saleswoman. How many people do we get like that? Probably none, right? And we can definitely get into kind of later in the show why that connotation might exist. But no, like when I first went off to college, I wasn't really sure exactly what I wanted to do. Really, I thought college was a little bit different than what I had expected, and I don't think, like Justin from our family, like too many folks had shared their experiences of college. So it's kind of like go into a four-year university. The expectations for me was that there was going to be this huge think tank, this huge potential experiment to try, really thinking about or influencing the world in a creative fashion. And in a positive way, and making an impact. That's the expectations I went into. And about my first, second year into school, to be honest, I was looking to be in academics, to actually maybe write policy, kind of study pre-law, maybe go to law school, and then later on wanted to be a professor. And get my master's degree and my PhD doctorate. And again, really be in the academic field, make policy decisions, influence, and make a difference in the world.
Well, what the heck happened?
Great question. And that's why we're here tonight.
Well, how did you get derailed from that objective? I mean, you get your degree, you leave college, then what? What do you do?
Well, all right. So let me make kind of a unique. I'll be vulnerable here. and I'll state that I myself, at the core of my heart, am more along of like a socialist, I would say. But the harsh reality is that we live in a capitalist society, and therefore, by practicality, I would say, by heart and mind, a socialist, and by practicality and trade, a capitalist. So college is part of that awakening moment, and I think, frankly, growing up kind of showcases this little bit of I don't want to use the word hustle, but I would say, kind of an independent push towards uh, seeing and looking for opportunities and building those opportunities. So before I left for school, I had started and was running a very small, had maybe a few customers, pooper scooping business for the back of the yard, looking for neighbors and people that our mother had worked for, and asking them, hey, you have a dog, who's cleaning up the back of your yard? So started really like a little mini pooper scooping business, and was sort of successful at that, as much as you can be. I will say though, it was a job. But the idea there was to try and again create an opportunity, and an income in there. And there was what they had tagged as in college. It was around my junior year. They had kind of coined this internship, but it was really a full-time job where you were essentially franchised to run your own painting company. And it was called College Works Painting. And the idea was to go door to door, and ask, and find out and see whose house needed to be painted, and potentially who was open for an estimate, with the ultimate goal being able to put forth a price, negotiate potentially that price if necessary, negotiate the work being done, and then execute it. And after the organization, College Works Painting, would take their 20% cut. Then after your labor that you would pay out, you hired painters and the supplies, then that difference is what you'd be cut. So again, that was another space for me where I was kind of on the side thinking about, how do I make money? How do I make a difference? So in college, when my plan was to be in academics and to get my doctorate and PhD, after about my senior year of talking to different professors that had been doing that, either adjunct professors, those that were in the process of getting their doctorate, and those that had been in the professor for decades and well established, they kind of all gave me the same spiel, which was simply this: you don't make a lot of money, and you could run up a lot of debt. And that really kind of goals out of life was maybe not necessarily in the cards for me. And so I needed to make that pivot and make that switch, and therefore began my journey.
So your journey out of college, you started with some pretty big name financial companies, right?
I did, and how I get into that is also a story too.
But how did you get into it?
So again, hopefully this won't be as long-winded, but shortly after school and realizing that, hey, like there has to be a way to make ends meet, and that like I wouldn't have the ability to necessarily stay in academics, and then kind of some personal stuff and stuff with family, needed to help kind of put myself in a position to help support. So the need to make ends meet was very important. So right out of the gate, started into the bartending field and kind of serving, and at the same time thinking about, hey, what opportunities are available to me. So actually also started a kind of attempt at a marketing company, and had gotten 3 customers and did estimates. and I was making calls at night. And then with like on my off times, meet with customers and sit down with them and to get, potentially solicit them for a marketing opportunity. I think at that time I was very young, so probably didn't come off as the biggest expert. At the same time, with some offsides, I was studying coding, which will come in later, starting to at least, and then also looking at finance, because if we're gonna be honest, right? If you want to have a really good understanding of how different, and you're not necessarily into the space of money, but you're being ruled by money, then it's important to understand how the language of business and how all money kind of works, right? So I ended up having a neighbor who had worked at Fidelity and didn't know this at the time, but that's part of kind of building relationships and growing with people, and long nights sitting outside, drinking a few barley pops and having long conversations. You get to build relationships, and at the same time kind of was just studying finance, trying to understand the language, trying to relate that to the marketing company, also learning that from a code and like thinking about an application, and then long story short, he had found out he was into Fidelity. He was actually a portfolio analyst and began to ask him questions. He gave me some books. And then eventually that led to me being able to talk a little bit more. I also had rented out some books myself, watched some at that time. YouTube was kind of in its prime, and studying and studying. And it gave me enough lingo to be able to speak the language. But I would say, since then it's been still huge growth, but that was the start, and that led me to my first interview and the door opening to starting at Fidelity. So hopefully that gives some context.
I think it does, because the important thing that I want the audience to keep in mind here is, and it's actually followed you your whole career, is this power of networking, right? You landed some of these jobs not through the stereotypical means of applying, but rather because you knew someone on the inside. Is that correct?
I think it's a combination of both. I think it's about taking the skill sets that you have at the time and then asking yourself, what is the value that I can drive either for somebody else or in the marketplace. Just I heard this at a conference a couple weeks ago. I really liked it. It's this equation, I think, really boils down to. And again, it's not an actual equation, but the metaphor of it is really nice. It's value equals substance times impact. Value equals substance times impact. So starting out of school with a pre-law philosophy degree, trying to get into finance, not a lot of substance that I can bring, and the impact that I can have comes down to the people that I know. And because I'm just out of school, don't really know a lot of folks. So maybe I'm not driving a lot of value. However, if I go into a role that's using the skills that I have, such as interpersonal soft skills or connections, and can be in a scenario where I talk to a lot of people, maybe doing something that doesn't require a lot of substance, but I can learn and grow by being in that field and exposed to that information, then I can start to build the skill sets that I have, deliver substance, continue to connect with other people, and then that substance, that thing that you're providing, as you make and build that network, you're driving impact. You're sharing that. And that is how you drive value in the marketplace. So to your point, to some degree, it is 100% about networking, but it's also thinking about what is the value that I can drive or add. And sometimes it comes down to just asking or learning about somebody else's profession, learning about somebody else's goals, learning about what somebody else is trying to do and what they're trying to drive from value, and then aligning yourself accordingly or getting and focusing on acquiring those skills to make that happen.
Gotcha. Now, to those in the audience who are wondering why on earth I'm having a guy on the show talking about sales, here's why. All right. As a creative professional, many of you have dabbled in freelancing, or perhaps you do it today. So you have to not only be a creative person, but you also have to have that salesperson mentality in order to attract and keep clients. And it's the same with, the more of the in-house roles too. You have to present to executives and convince stakeholders of your design proposals. So that being said, Sean, like your position itself, you're doing a lot of presentations, you're doing a lot of convincing. You're trying to attract people to want to use the Microsoft products. How difficult is that?
It comes back to value, right? And so by trade, some people would say, "Oh, you're a salesperson," right? And that has this like icky connotation. It has an icky connotation because when we think about sales, we think about the door-to-door salesman selling vacuums, or that solicitor calling you, or like things like Wolf of Wall Street, right? Or we just have these icky connotations that it's this place where you're trying to either connive or take money out of somebody else's pocket and put into a company or your own pocket. When reality is that all sales is, it's aligning that, go back to that word value, right? Aligning value based off of the needs of an organization or a person and what your solution or your organization can offer. And again, that can go from a lot of different areas. There's typically two thought processes around sales. There's transactional sales and consultative sales. Sometimes there's a combination of both. Transactional is what you think of when you go into, say, hey, I just found this candy, Spice Drops. I just found Spice Drops, and I'm ready to buy this.
A great choice.
Right. Oh, I don't know about that, but I'm ready to buy this, right? That's transaction. And you need somebody there maybe to process that transaction. And then consultative is more of being able to bring that value, or in a lot of times work within a very complex space. And it's being able to communicate how that value fits in to help somebody meet their goals. So how does that work within Microsoft? There's a lot of technical side and a lot of my background that I'm happy to get into if the desire is there, to understand the tech space and understand how those components work. My value that I bring is being able to understand each industry and organizations in that industry, what their goals are, how that ties in with their financial objectives, right? So there comes that finance experience. And then being able to align and show both how to accomplish making that a reality with the tool sets of Microsoft exclusively, and also how and what the impact will be to their bottom line or to an objective.
You have to know your customer. That's essentially what you have to do in order to be successful, right?
At 100%. Absolutely.
So, if I'm understanding correctly, it's not just about selling the customer on the technology and talking about how great the technology is, or how great the product is. It's about knowing what your customer's needs are and going back to what you're talking about. It's about adding value to those needs, right?
Yes. And where I'm more successful is when I really understand that industry very well. And I understand usually the objectives that organizations face inside that industry, whether it be manufacturing, whether it be healthcare, whether it be the legal space, retail. Really understanding that industry. And I spent a lot of time in these different industries, several years in each one of them, some close to a decade, and have a really good understanding of, okay, where's that industry going? What are the problems that a lot of those organizations are facing? And then asking and understanding, both from a research perspective, understanding the quarterly reports, to having the conversation when the time permits, and bringing those to the table. Say, hey, I've done my research here. This is what I know. Is this also what you're facing? Or is there something different that I'm not addressing or not aware of? And that's the kind of question that I go in with when I, first meet or first work with a customer. And that's the kind of sets the stage on where and how I kind of help them. And so it's really about building that relationship, more importantly, to help them meet or expedite their goals.
Let's specifically focus on what you're selling, right? Which revolves around the AI solutions that Microsoft offers. Because it's so fast moving and because there's so many changes in tech, in AI specifically, how do you stay up to date with all of it? Like, and not feel overwhelmed? Because a lot of us in the creative space, we you look on our websites and we see, oh, there's another new technology we have to learn. Oh, great. I just spent the last year trying to master this technology. Oh, wait, there's another new piece of software. How do you stay up to date with all of it without going out of your mind?
So I am out of my mind and a lot of coffee.
There you go.
No, of course. No, I think this comes back to the kind of the comment that I made before, right? Which is being immersed in an environment really gives you, if that's what you're passionate about, or if you don't know and you want to kind of figure out what you're passionate about, being immersed in that field is going to give you the most likelihood at bats of being exposed to an environment. And it's up to you to take how much you learn on your own or how much you learn in that situation. But because I am immersed in it, because I'm speaking with like several customers on a daily basis, because I'm working with product group team, because I'm working with technical specialists, and then on, I'm constantly up on the market conditions, what's happening in both the stock market, when acquisitions are being made, when there's drops or layoffs, and then where there is going to be development of AI. I mean, can't catch everything. It's impossible to. But I do have a pulse, I guess you could say, so that when I do hear something that's new or a kind of concept, I can be able to go to my resources, check that, look at that, think about that, learn it, and be able to provide value back based on those conditions. So in this rapid environment, I don't think you're able to 100% certainty be 100% about everything. And that's going to always be the case. There's no absolute terms, but you can do your best and be as informed as possible.
How do you deal with objections from potential clients or people who tell you no, or maybe people who just disagree with you? How do you handle that?
Yeah, well, when you thank gosh we don't have camera on, because when you look like me and talk like me and act like me, rejection is very normal, and so I guess that kind of has calloused me. But I would let's put the joke aside, right? Let's be honest. So I think it's always hard. It's always hard. Rejection is always hard, and I think for me the biggest like rejection is if I truly believe that I can deliver significant value, an approach. Like I've done the research, I've made the outcome. I feel like, hey, like this will help, and I know it will help. I'll give you a story. One time, where I was working with an organization, I'd worked with the CIO and the VP of IT, and had put together like basically a plan. And the idea was to use one of our assessment tools, and the customer decided to go back through a different path, and it ended up costing them a lot of money to run that assessment through somebody else and using a different tool. And I was adamant that my tool was like the best, and I was adamant that what we would be doing was in the best interest of the customer and would not have cost them anything. And so like it was tough for me to kind of accept that, and I didn't maybe handle that the best way with the customer, because I was really, again, adamant about me believing that my approach was the best. And so that hurt the relationship a little bit. Basically ended up getting kind of dismissed from the account. And they ended up later on, the other assessment didn't go too well, and they ended up taking the route I had suggested. So the reason I say this, the reason I share the story is because maybe what you're passionate about and the direction you want to take it is the best or is not the best for the customer. I would say realizing over time is learning where that middle space is and where the compromise is and how you can best support them, even when it's not typically your ideas, allows for the greatest growth for you to hear out the customer and for them to hear you out and for you them to really ultimately drive value. So while I'm not still perfect at that, I think that that's kind of how I understand rejection, and how I kind of manage that and understand that again, my idea, my goal might not be the best thing for the customer, or at least they don't think that. It's my job to communicate that, but there might be times where that's just not going to actually come to an agreement. And in those cases, I really think it's about doing and listening and understanding the common ground, and then and focusing on that.
So, what strategies do you use to like close a deal? Like, if you know that you're getting really close, or maybe it's a long shot, but you really think that your solutions, your products could really, bring business to that customer. What strategies do you use to make those deals happen?
That is a great, great question. And when it comes down to sales, and when it comes down to just aligning values, no matter what we do, whether that's in an actual quote unquote sales profession, whether that's within a consulting profession, or really what that's you're selling yourself in an interview. The bottom line is what I'd stated before. It's about like driving value and driving value for someone else. And so closing that deal is being able to really understand what that value is and be able to, in most cases, what I'm working with, some of the solutions can be costly, right? And some of the projects can be quite large. So that's a big investment. And if that investment is made and it does not work out for the customer, there are jobs that are at stake. There are careers that are at stake, and even the organization themselves can face significant impacts. Take, for example, the airline issue that had resulted in all those flights being canceled because there was an update in a security software called
Oh,
CrowdStrike.
yes. Yes, I do remember this. Yeah. To those of you who are not familiar with it, yeah, CrowdStrike was being utilized by a lot of companies, including airlines, and they did like what was it, a software update, just a routine software update, and it basically shut everything down. And at least here in the states, and even in other countries or around the world, they were just at a standstill. They didn't know what to do. How does that happen? And yet it did happen. And to your point, Sean, like these are people's lives, these are jobs, this is safety that's on the line at this point. There's a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of the biggest disruptions that ever really had kind of impacted by tech, essentially over the past decade. And think about that, right? Like that was a decision that was made, and the impacts are devastating. And what happened? Significant fallout, significant revenue changes. C-suite leaderships were changed. There was a lot of accountability questioning. Government got involved, and so thinking about it from a customer's standpoint, like these investments make a big impact. They also can result in organizational changes, right? So really understanding what and how these tools can be used, communicating and clear, and understanding and aligning to the objectives of an organization allows for when it comes time towards being like, hey, we're interested, we'd like to move forward with this. Getting all those buying signals, or even before them, yeah, we're still thinking about it. Reminding and being able to communicate clearly the impacts that this will have. A lot of times I'm putting together return on investment, total cost of ownership, and I'm showing what estimated cost can have, both in an organizational change, leveraging percentages, or impacts from like a revenue standpoint. And again, aligning the goals, because if the goals aren't there and I'm sharing that stuff, those numbers don't matter. I will also share a book that I think, if no matter where where we're coming from, right? I feel like we all have to sell ourselves in our day to day, so we're always selling, whether we're labeled as a salesperson or not. But there's a book by Chris Voss called Never Split the Difference. And Chris Voss used to be a CIA negotiator, hostage negotiator, and had basically got it was maybe not CIA, FBI, I think, but basically had gotten into in line with Harvard and it gotten into the business school, some of the top business schools, and it was either Harvard or Wharton. Now my memory's slipping me, so my credibility is out the window, which is what I just talked about before. But the point is never split the difference. The goal is he took some of those strategies and found that negotiating, that process of CIA negotiating, hostage negotiating, translates in the business field, and it's predominantly about understanding what the underlying mission or goals are of those hostage takers, and then being able to repeat that back, let them know that you fully understand what those hostage takers, which in this case, not hostage, maybe bad example, but our customers or the people you work with, what are the values, what are the goals, what are the things they want to do, communicating those back, and then clearly articulating how you or the value you bring or the product or solutions that you offer will make that happen.
So the book Sean's referring to is called Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It by author Chris Voss. I just dropped a link to the book on Amazon in the chat, but if you're listening on demand, you can look it up. Yeah, that's a really interesting approach.
Can I pause you for a minute?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, apologies. I just saw in the chat, Elizabeth said that you all love dad jokes. So I just wanted to ask the question, why did The Crow win an award? Because they were outstanding in the field. But go ahead.
Yeah, I don't like dad jokes, and I'm gonna cut that from the on-demand portion of this.
It's my brother for you.
To those of you who are just tuning in, we're speaking with Sean Bamforth, who has spent his career working in sales for the finance and tech industries for the past 15 years. He currently works as a data apps and AI specialist for Microsoft. And tonight he's talking to us about how sales and the approach to sales strategies can really apply to all aspects of our lives if we're in the creative field or we're in other fields. Let me ask you this, Sean, because working in sales is obviously competitive and sometimes cutthroat. There's a lot of pressures. How do you handle such intense pressures with a job like yours?
A lot of coffee. Did I mention that? And who's handling the pressures? Yeah, no, I do think it is very competitive, especially within tech, especially within Microsoft. I'm very honored and very privileged to be able to have that opportunity and chance. I think it was something like we get 1 million applications a month. So dealing with that is a reminder, right? A reminder of how competitive these roles are. But instead of turning that into angst, I turn it into motivation. Remind myself, hey, I'm privileged, and also time I have to continue to prove myself. So I got to make sure that I'm knowledgeable and stay up on tech and information and continue to grow. But then you ask, how do you do that, right? Like, how do you do that? That's where I think kind of it's along the lines of how I drive value in with customers or the marketplace is also how I drive interest in learning these things for myself without, kind of sometimes it's dry, right? And not falling asleep or losing that motivation is I think about, okay, how do I use technology in my own life? How do I begin to make maybe automate or improve or like add something fun to what I do? And that's taken me down the path of acquiring a server, and being able to have a security router, and playing around with different applications. And that's kind of also what led me to programming, kind of the back of it. So while this talk is predominantly, sales focused, there's a lot of like skill sets that I've acquired over the year that isn't sales related. But because we're focused on sales, like that's definitely something that I'm going to talk through today. And if time permits, happy to kind of go into those other spaces and how I get into it. But again, I think no matter what you do, you're always going to have to sell yourself. No matter whether it's individually, whether it's within an organization, or just, that's your title. It's always about finding the unique value proposition that you bring or that your product brings or your organization brings, and being able to echo and align and find where that unique value proposition can fit and help another organization accomplish their unique value proposition and the value that they're trying to drive, and linking the two together. That in the cornerstone is what driving value is within selling yourself and ultimately positioning where you fit in this world.
Yeah, and on that note, a lot of people that I mentor, they're always asking about job hunting strategies. How do you get ahead in this field? And I always tell them, look, you got to find out what makes you unique. What is it that you do that brings value to an organization, to a job role? How do you set yourself apart from everyone else? Because this is a very competitive field, the creative industry. And it's tough. It can be really hard, especially when you're comparing yourself with other people and you're just trying to stay afloat. But let me tell you guys something, a little bit of a secret here. Now, if you are new to the Adobe Creative Career Discord, I'd like to take a moment to share one of the coolest things we're working on right now, and that would be the Adobe Creative Apprenticeship Program. This program connects aspiring creative people like you with top creative companies, providing the actual training and experience that you need, which also looks amazing on a resume. Think of it like the ultimate internship meets mentorship opportunity. But wait, that's not all. You see, there is another aspect to the program, and it's called commissioned projects. This is where you can get even more experience working on an actual paid project with Adobe. Yes, that's right, Adobe as your first client. Seriously. The details on the Creative Apprenticeship Program, the commissioned projects, and more incredible career resources can all be found at behance.net/resources. That's behance.net/resources. Tonight's guest, Sean Bamforth, he is available on LinkedIn. So I'm going to drop a link to his LinkedIn here so that you guys can connect with him.
Yeah, reach out.
And if you have a question tonight, post it in the chat or message Sean offline through LinkedIn. It's the people that I bring on to Spotlight sessions, I try to bring them on to be valuable resources to you guys because I know how difficult it is. And when I was first breaking into the creative space, I didn't have any of this. So we're trying to create that for you so that you can use it to your advantage here.
Just full disclosure, I'm behind in messages on LinkedIn, so if it takes me a couple of days to get back to you, just provide me with that grace. But I will get back to you, and I will respond.
Yeah, and it's true. He will. He even takes a while to respond to me, everyone, and he's my brother. So. All right. This question
That's probably for different reasons. Go ahead.
All right. This question comes from Elizabeth in the chat here. She's talking about Microsoft AI, and she says, "Do you work with Copilot a lot?"
Great question. Okay. All right. Great question. Now you're gonna get me into the tech space. So, little like background, right? So, Copilot is built on the OpenAI platform. I think we're all aware of that. The kind of that how that broke into that space. OpenAI actually is built on Microsoft's like our chips and our servers, our technology. OpenAI did go to another vendor and tried to build that out, but there was a lot of constraints. They were able to find the capabilities to have the back-end infrastructure support them. And that was within Microsoft's servers and tech and our chips and kind of how we custom built those servers, which opened up that Pandora's box. It's also what allowed Microsoft to take that first crack and provide investment funding and have that relationship where we have a majority stake in OpenAI. And then it allows us to repackage the OpenAI platform into our solution sets. And so I work within the Azure space. So I help customers build their own Copilot. So allow them to pull in the OpenAI into, let's say, like a platform that they own, and then allow them to train the prompts, train the kind of questions, narrow that down, and also pick the models that they want. There's these things called large language models. Probably heard them by now. And those are kind of the cornerstones of what responses you can expect and the type of response you can expect from a question. And they're all trained on like the some kind of data that gives them the ability to improve or not. So, anyways, that's a long story short, or short. How do I say that? That's just a long story long, well drawn out. And the answer here is that so I help customers build their own Copilot. That said, Copilot is very much part of the product suite at Microsoft. And so what Copilot is Copilot is a pre-built, already packaged, ready to go OpenAI ChatGPT format that is installed and incorporated within some kind of solution, whether that be their web browser like Bing, their search, a web browser like Edge, and then their Bing search, or it can be Copilot can be into their CRM solution, right? Their customer relationship management solution, where they ask it questions against their sales pipelines, or maybe they're doing marketing campaign. They can ask it like, "Hey, how did my marketing campaign do?" Or what was the impacts on that ad we ran? Copilot will already have that already built in. So I also work with organizations predominantly on building those individual AI into their applications themselves.
All right. Well, let's tackle AI itself because, it, especially creatives, a lot of creatives consider AI a threat, even though it's becoming a tool and it's utilized in a lot of Adobe programs too. Society at large is very hesitant to readily adopt AI 100%, mainly because it's replacing jobs. How do you, like, I guess, deter that type of negative thinking and shift the conversation to this represents an opportunity, especially for other creatives to kind of utilize it to take advantage of and to further their careers? How do you address that? How do you address that mindset that you're not the bad guy?
Do you think I'm the bad guy?
Sometimes, yeah.
Oh, geez, that's a loaded question. So, anywho, now that I know I have an existential crisis where my brother looks at me as the evil one, which frankly, I'm the good one. He's the evil one. But so to kind of that's a good question. So look at kind of how look how kind of technology just works within human existence. All right. And this is where I might get a little philosophical, but it's important because it sets the framework on how we think about these problems. And just even the past 300 years, past 40 years. And I say that because look at the printing press, right? So in a way, the printing press replaced a lot of jobs in the sense that there was maybe not a necessity for monks or other folks to transcribe the Bible or literature or conversions and then resell those books, or again it created mass producing, mass printing. And then when the computer and digital age or mass production took place, the printing press maybe lost some of its importance, right? And so the need to be like have your own printing company, or to work within that field of owning the newspapers, like some of that went away. We became digitized. And look at the way that went in the creative field as well. Design from like, painting, not painting, but designing like billboards, or again, bad example, billboards, but basically like printing or painting or manually creating ads and works of art got replaced with digitization. And like the Apple and Mac kind of led that direction. So here you are creating these digital ads, you're creating the space, and so people aren't going to school for uh, marketing design in the sense of like printing. They're going to school for digitization. They're going to school like, okay, web design, like how do I kind of build that out. And we've seen the market industry change from there as well. So uh, AI is going to be another tool. The impacts on it will most likely be increasing GDP and productivity. You can be able to do a lot more with less resources.
Yeah, and I get that, but still, it's replacing jobs. It's taking away opportunities. I mean, a lot of times when we're just trying to struggle to get a client, and I've heard this directly from clients, well, I don't need your skills because I can just automate it through, another template program or another resource. How do you shift the conversation, especially to younger creatives now who might be hesitant to even get into the creative industry, knowing that there's always that chance that they're going to get replaced, that they're going to get laid off? What can we do to position ourselves to better utilize AI as an actual creative tool instead of view it as a threat?
I think a key shift there is first off, if you're looking to go out on your own, I know that's not the focus here, but I just do want to address that. Like, if you're looking to go out on your own, the ability to have such thing as like a Copilot or a ChatGPT or OpenAI gives you the keys and kingdom to get first off questions that you have answered like at your fingertips, and also resources like your own education, your own teacher. So for those areas that you might be lacking, now you can learn them, and you can learn them faster than before. That was hard to like find those resources. You can have those at your fingertips. The second thing is that it gives you a worker, right? So like it gives you like your own MBA. It gives you your own like creative input. It gives you proofreader. It gives you a digital creator. So where your weaknesses are, you can become more complete. And if you're on your own, you can essentially run your own business with a lot less resources. And that there creates the ability of an entry place that I have seen in the past be reduced, because a lot of times what prevented people from going on out on their own or being able to expand in their startup or learn a new skill set was they didn't have the resources to accomplish that. Now you have access to more, so you can do more. And that means you're more competitive, and you can find your own unique value proposition. And then you can shore up some of the spaces that you might be weak on. You can make that more rounded. And then additionally, you can take what you're good at and expand upon that and make that better.
So using it as like an advocate and basically like a free worker for yourself, a free personal assistant in essence.
Absolutely, and that's the case from like the use of like Copilot or like the use of like ChatGPT, and then in the actual marketplace themselves, like I had said before, right? I am a pragmatic capitalist, right? And we are all in a system of exchanging goods and services, where we want to have the greatest product or the greatest service for the cheapest cost. Um, when you go to the store and you buy groceries, are you buying Sour Patch Kids, or are you buying spiced gumdrops? Right? Might be a bad example, but it's just my brother likes spiced gumdrops, and so maybe not the best flavoring, but maybe a more value alternative, right? So the idea here is that that's why we have such a selection, because it's a combination of quality, quantity, and cost. And that goes back to the value out of is that what is that unique value? And so that's what all organizations are after. And what determines their success or not is whether they can, and we all know this, right? Like whether they can actually execute on that in enough to make a big enough impact where other people give them money or like offer something that can allow them to exist, right? So what AI will do is help them become either more competitive, uh, unlock something that they didn't have before, or be able to drive some kind of value. And in the creative field, um, there are so many tools and actions now that are unlocked for creatives. It just becomes a question of finding and working with that medium and seeing where you can bend that medium.
Well, let's take it from a case study perspective here, because you bring up this aspect of organizations are trying to save money. It's the capitalist mindset, and you can't blame them, right? We want to do things as cheaply as possible and as quickly as possible. So,
Well, not necessarily, because sometimes it can also be adding a certain product feature that wasn't there before, in which case you're
ah,
going to be spending money.
well, no, it's good that you brought that up, because going off of, that prior point, I brought up here is like a lot of, not all, but a lot of organizations may balk at the price. They may go with the cheaper alternative. So let's take, for example, your job. We all know that Microsoft offers a fantastic product, but it's not always the cheapest product. So let's say you have a client that you're trying to attract, and they have decided to go with the cheaper solution, even though you know that your solution is better and it can provide that added value that meets their needs, but they're just not seeing eye to eye with you. What do you do in the conversation where you drive it back to value over cost?
Aligning the ultimate technology with what they're looking to accomplish, and understanding and aligning real expectations of what the cost is to make that a reality. And that only comes down from really spending the time to learn what the goals and where somebody wants to go. In the case of somebody wanting to grow in the business, be more competitive, grab more market share, you're typically going to see a need to invest in their product and grow their product so that they can provide a unique value, or they can gain more market share. In those that are looking to, maybe get themselves positioned for an acquisition, they may need to spend the money on becoming the organization more agile. The agility of that organization will allow them to be more nimble. So when they get acquired, that new acquisition, the company, the acquirer will say, "Hey, great! Now they're easy to, because they're nimble, bring their practices in house," and that is something that people look for. So it really just comes down to like where they want to be. If an organization wants to downsize, right? That's what we usually see, and we usually hear bad things and have bad connotations. But there's a strategic reason typically behind downsizing, behind getting more lean and more effective. It really, again, comes down to the values. And so your original question is just saying like, hey, how do I how do I like how do I reframe that? Or it's really understanding before we even get to that objection, what are they trying to accomplish? And that's, whether we're in the creative field, we're in the sales field, we're in the finance field, that's what it comes down to. It really comes down to understanding each other, listening to each other. What do we want, and how do we help make it make sense for two people or two organizations, and how do we accomplish things together? And that's what turns something into just being like a, just like a salesperson, to a partner and a consultant and an advisor.
Let's go forward in the future. Let's kind of speculate on where the technology might be taking us. Based only on your opinion, I don't want to get you. I don't want to get you into trouble talking about projects that you're not clear to talk about. I'm going to give you some keywords and trends that may have been big yesteryear or might still be in the vernacular today. And maybe you can give me a little insight based on where you think it might be headed. Sound good?
Yeah, sure.
All right. So one of those is Web3.
Mm.
We heard a lot of talk about that a couple of years ago. It seems like it's died down. Not as many people are talking about Web3 concepts as much as they were before. Do you think Web3, the Web3 movement, is going to gain some traction again.
What is even Web3?
Well, I guess let's break down some of those intricacies with Web3, like crypto, tokens, the metaverse, some of these big buzzwords that we thought, okay, that's where the technology is headed, right? And then all of a sudden AI came out and that kind of like stole the spotlight away from all those things.
Yeah.
Yeah, even though they go hand in hand, some respects, right?
Yeah.
Because AI is powering everything. But where do you see some of these like Web3 technologies going in the future? Do you think they're going to come back?
So I mean, all right. I kind of said that tongue in cheek, right? What is Web3? And that's an issue because that frames how we approach this. Web3, oftentimes the connotation I boiled it down to is this decentralization of the move of Web 2.0, which came from Web 1.0 or the origin of Web 1.0. So the original of like, how do we get here, right? So like the internet itself, all that is a collection, a network of multiple systems and computers that exchange packets amongst themselves. And the evolution and need to grow the internet led basically this need to like lay down fiber lines and lay down like significant technology that allows for like communication across overseas, right? Specifically Microsoft is a leader in this space, has laid down a lot of like lines and the ability that connects networks and service from internationally, like in Europe to the US, and it's like every continent, every country. And those that have been able to invest in the ability to lay that has grown and become very strong. And that's a lot of IT companies like Google, Microsoft, AWS. The infrastructure has been built and has grown in the web environment. So the concept of a Web 3.0 is a way in which there's a decentralization away from the internet or away from large conglomerates owning essential means that are used, and the means in production is more smaller areas and more controlled by a group or by a collective individuals that aren't a big conglomerate.
Yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things that we're seeing with Web 2.0 is these tech companies are basically controlling a lot of the flow of information. They're controlling the algorithms. They're controlling what you're seeing. Web3 represents kind of like this new movement, this new idea of decentralizing that information and putting it back in the hands of a group of people, even though that may be a flawed argument in itself, right? Because you still have to have some sort of control. But like, let's look past that. Like, let's look at the actual technologies that have emerged from that. Do you think there is a future for crypto or for tokens or for a larger concept of the metaverse? I mean, are you seeing some of that in your day-to-day activities?
So I want to address the kind of I want to come back to this. I want to come back to crypto, right, and blockchain because that's a separate conversation than what we see as like movement of Web 3 and a like movement of more of like a grassroots movement of the internet that is more democratized. Um, I think that we have an issue where technology, in order to get technology accessible, cost effective, and built and researched, we largely need an investment and typically a big investment. And once that's done, it's hard and those changes are completed. It's hard to say and like not have that technology be leveraged by the investments that are made into it for the folks that made those investments. Um, I think Microsoft has done a really good job. I mean, I'm gonna kind of put my corporate hat on, but it's also a personal. I think Microsoft has done a really good job in trying to democratize AI. At the same time, they've invested with OpenAI a lot of infrastructure on the back end, and then as that is developing, there needs to be capacity, there needs to be servers, there needs to be compute put behind that, as well as evolving and improving that model. There's a lot of infrastructure that takes place. So, to the point of where Web3 sits and why maybe we've not seen like it take off is because who's going to make that infrastructure investment? And if it's coming up typically from large organizations, the privatized that are like actually, really driving practicality. I mean, what we see with ChatGPT and OpenAI and how it's incorporated in all of our lives and starting to see that more and more, that might not have happened had there not been this investment into the infrastructure. And that's what I see going now moving forward with crypto is that crypto, the investment and the structure and the building of crypto from a practical standpoint, in many cases, doesn't translate more than maybe a common exchange or a value in providing this egalitarian feel towards a community, right? By having our own currency. But where I've seen blockchain resonate really, really well is actually within secure exchange of goods and services in the supply chain side of things. I won't want to get like really down to the techie side of that. I like if anyone's interested, feel free to reach out to me. Happy to kind of go in more detail, can kind of send some literature. But there are some practical applications that I've seen in secure exchange of a ledger and processing of goods and souls in the supply chain side. And that is where I think we'll see, like, if it hasn't already, really take off. And then the question becomes is essentially what the internet was in its infant stages. We have a really good infrastructure. We have a really good technology. Now, how are we going to use it in a way with our current economic system, right, which is driving value, or do we create a new economic system that we can use that technology to achieve that? Like, those are the questions that philosophically we don't know. But I do know that as this stuff builds out, we will have things that get developed that we've never thought about before. Tell somebody in the 50s they're going to have a handheld computer in their hand. They don't even know necessarily what a personal computer is, let alone to think about that in the palm of your hand. But that became something real, and it's changed our lives. That's the kind of things that this is giving birth to. And I think as a society, we're going to watch, and there will be history written about it, the impacts of what that is on a day-to-day space. And we're living history now.
How far away are we from some of those earth-shattering revelations? Do you think we're a few years out still from like the next big thing, or do you think we're just a few days out? Like, what's our time frame when it comes to the next big disruptor in the tech space?
The AI revolution is here. The impact that will have is cascading. I do believe that where we are now versus 2, 3, 4 years from here will potentially be very drastically different. Will it feel drastically different from us waking up and being happy and like eating and things like that? Or they not necessarily, but how we do business, how we interact with one another, how we go about our private lives and our corporate lives, those all will see an impact. And to what degree and how is yet to be determined. But I think that's going to happen in the next few years. I do. And I think that we're going to see rapid change. In much the same way that social media has clearly played a role in our day-to-day.
Yeah, well, I'm sure I can speak for a lot of us out there. We're kind of getting sick of this social media control. We're ready for the next big thing to emerge, the next cool platform, the next good experience, that is something more that, especially as creatives, that we have more control over.
No, I was just gonna say, this is where we can get a little tit for tat on, what does that really mean as we communicate through the social platform of Discord, right? And more importantly, I think social media has actually given for some ability for some creatives to find an outlet enabling them to communicate or reach a broader audience.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And that's it, right? That comes down to wrapping it all up in that regard. But like technology really interplays both in defining us, but letting us also define ourselves through that medium.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're absolutely right. But I think where the problem lies is when the algorithm now determines what we see and how much of an audience we can reach. And we don't even know what the algorithm is. So we can't even like recalibrate our approach to it because we don't even know, yeah, how it works or how we can reach a larger audience. We just a lot of it's guesswork and it just keeps evolving. And that's kind of why I'm looking forward to something along the lines of Web3 because it might be more of that freedom that people are looking for. Again, speaking from a creative perspective, right? Yeah, I know there's a lot of different business decisions that go
No,
into these
no,
things, but
no, and I think there is a consciousness in those Microsoft specifically. But I know I can't say Microsoft's the only one. But just because I know it very well, obviously. But I do see a conscious effort on being aware of that and trying to mitigate that and urge both legislation to be passed as well as um, leading an example of what that kind of ethical AI would look like and keeping these in mind in what we do. And look, we see that in some of the restrictions right out of the get-go of how and what AI could be used for. And that's why there's some prompts and there's some screening that's done to make sure that it's not being used for exploitation. It's not being used for violent means. Like I really think there is this time a conscious effort into technology and this impact of technology, especially at what we've seen and how we've seen technology being used in a bad way.
now do you think that we're at a point now where a lot of organizations are rushing to utilize AI in all of their programs and all of their applications and everything to where it's becoming almost like an AI overkill. And the reason I bring that up is thinking back several years prior, remember when everybody felt the need to have an app, like a mobile app, even though you could just have a mobile website and it would do the same thing. But people were like, no, I must have an app. And then you had all these organizations developing apps. And then a lot of those apps, went by the wayside today. Do you think AI is at that point now where a lot of these companies are just getting on board because it's hip, it's the latest thing?
I mean, I'm an Android user, so I can't speak for Apple, but I know on the Google Play Store, it's over 1.5 million available apps on just the Google platform of like the Play Store alone, right? So like on one hand, I think that yes, at one point there was like this need for apps, in the same way that the need for AI is now. Um, it's really a mad dash of what the market is demanding, right? So when I mean by the market, I mean what usually comprises what goods and services are being sold. It's individual buyers, consumers, Main Street, and then it's also like organizations acquiring something for their own use. Both are driving the demand. If there wasn't a demand for it, they probably wouldn't be consuming it. If they weren't consuming it, it wouldn't make the value or the business objective. So there is the push is coming for fear of being left behind. I think you're 100% what you allude there, if that's where you're going, is correct. The second component, though, is there is a real value that is had by having your own personal, essentially intelligent chatbot that can basically be both an educational resource for you, a consultant, and also be able to produce some things that would have taken maybe days or several hours to do. There's value there. And I think it's trying to capture that and bring that into what an offering is.
Yeah, I guess only time will tell, right? Time will tell. I mean, it's exciting to have these conversations. It's exciting to think about the future and all the opportunities that are presented right now. But we can't control those, you know. We can control certain aspects of it, but I want to focus on something we can control, and that's our personal health. And the reason I bring that up is because in a stressful job like what you have, personal health is very important, right?
Oh yeah.
What's your regimen look like to maintaining that personal well-being, to maintaining that health? Because I know you work out, you eat right, but how do you stick with that? And what are some tips that the audience can take away that maybe they can put into practice?
Great question. Which by the means I am no I am no Ryan Reynolds, to be clear here.
Well, that's obvious.
No, okay. Well, I didn't think it was very obvious, but I do now. Another existential crisis. Um,
But I'll tell you what, audience, my brother is more of a Hugh Jackman
oh come
in
on.
terms of how he's gotten jacked with his workout, and that's why I want you to share this, Sean, because you started off, with these quick wins, these small tips, these small things that you would do, and over time, those became good personal habits that you carried out or you carried through. And like, what are some tips you can give us to get us back into shape, to kind of like get us back in the proper mindset of putting our health first? Yes, jobs are important, but how do we remember? How do we maintain that those good habits?
Okay, so maybe not Hugh Jackman, maybe just a huge Jackmon. I don't know. Like let me like you maybe you do share that I am on a journey, right? And again, this is a growth mindset. No matter what you do in life, it's always about evolving, changing, being aware of like what you can influence, what you can. And so like I would say maybe 2 years ago, I probably had 30, 40 pounds extra than what I do now, as of like maybe the summertime. And then I've been kind of maybe adding weight, so that's slowly going down, but I have been maybe putting on more like lean protein and more muscle mass.
Great.
But
Give us some
anyways,
tips.
so first off is really understanding the nutrients you're putting in and understanding it from like a macro standpoint, right? So understanding what your caloric intake needs are. So if I'm sitting at my desk and I didn't move a one, and I even tapped my foot and I did nothing all day, I have a pretty good idea of how many calories that I will be burning through that day. And it's about maintaining, when we say macros, right, what we mean is your total calories, and then how much of that is protein, how much of that is fat, how much of that is carbs. And with a back and forth of all those adding up, what that caloric intake is, if that's beneath or at that maintenance level, right? So if I sit at my desk, I don't do anything, let's say I burn 2,000 calories a day. If I eat 2,000 calories, I will neither lose weight or gain weight. And now, if I add exercise and diet and the other components or add more calories, I may add weight or I may reduce weight. And so that's the first thing. That is like managing that nutrients. It's super simple, very hard to control because most of the foods that are out there, most of the things that we do, it's kind of addictive in a way. It tastes good, and we want it to taste good. And I do eat junk. I do. And it's about limiting those areas and understanding, did I hit my number or not? And I think that also then kind of gives me a structure, which restricts me from then going and eating junk because I only know I have that I only have that caloric threshold that I can eat for that day. And either I have to exercise more or I have to reduce the way eat something if I eat something that's very high in calories, very high in fats, very high in sugar. And that really helps me understand that level. And that I think is a very good starting point. Once that's done, and I think in tandem, the exercise component. And I'm not, you don't have to, we don't have to, I don't have to just like lift weights, just lift weights. I actually get hurt that way. Walking is a really good process. And all you need is a pair of sneakers. It's just walking. And what I mean by that is that, sometimes folks will say, hey, I don't have a lot of time. If you happen to have the luxury of having a treadmill, do your work on the treadmill. Walk. If you want to just like go out and get out away, right, from life, and you live in an area that is walkable, just go outside and just walk around. Walk for an hour. Walk for an hour and a half, right? Just look around, walk the places. I guarantee you that will add up. And if you walk about, I don't know, 8, 9, 10,000 steps a day, that adds like an extra 200, 300 calories from a deficit perspective. So you can eat maybe a little bit more if you want to maintain your weight and you want to have a little bit of junk in the end. Or you keep it at that maintenance level and now you're going to lose a little bit of weight. So that kind of helps balance, at least I have used for weight management. Add additionally to that, a little extra nutrients. I think understanding and taking a multivitamin, and then understanding the foods that are dense in nutrients but low in calories, right? The boring stuff, the vegetables, the fruits, things like things of that. Bringing that into the diet and eating it helps keep my mind like fresh, and I can really tell when my mind is clean versus when it's kind of hazy and dark. And maybe I'm, making that up by eating a bunch of sugar and drinking a bunch of like coffee, So that's there. And then if after all that stuff, if there's still a focus or a desire to maybe build a little bit of muscle, there's some really good stuff out there. There's a guy, an ex-bodybuilder called Mike Israetel, Dr. Mike. Some of the things he says, a little questionable. But if you go into his YouTube channel and really dig to the video section, there's a section where he explains everything, and he gives like really good education around kind of workout routines and how to tire out the muscles. I think that might be a good starting point in focusing on that versus his technical stuff or his stuff where he's just literally, I think, trying to get likes and try to be a good influencer. But there's a lot of good information there, and shout out to him because he went to Temple in his undergrad, Temple University, and that's where I went for undergrad.
No kidding. Wow. Look at that. No, this is all great stuff. And I hope all of you out there are taking notes because, it is hard. It's hard going through life, yourself. But that's why we have this show. It's to create this opportunity to learn from others, to get different perspectives from others, and to be encouraged by others. And that's why we have built this Discord community to have that, through the mentorship thing, through just the overall community here in the Adobe Creative Career Discord. It's a great place to have these talks. And hopefully we can have more of them in the future. I know we've taken up a lot of your time tonight, Sean, but I just want to thank you for coming on to this program and sharing with us some of your wisdom, some of your insight. Hopefully it's been beneficial to you and the audience out there.
Have I put everyone to sleep now?
Well, hey, it adds to good health, right? Good sleep, right?
That's it.
To learn more about tonight's guest, Sean Bamforth, you can find him on LinkedIn, which I posted in the chat, or for those of you listening on demand in the show notes. Catch all the latest updates for the next Spotlight sessions and all the great content, again, here in the Adobe Creative Career Discord by following that upcoming events section at the top of the server so you can see what's coming next. Thank you to everyone who tuned in to listen to me, your host, Justin Bamforth, aka JBam. You can always find me on Discord, LinkedIn, or over on my website at justinbamforth.com. If that's all that you have for us tonight, Sean, I'll let you close us out.
Yeah, don't do business like my brother.
Don't do business like my brother. Take care. Good night. For more conversations with creative professionals, subscribe to the Spotlight Sessions podcast or check out the Adobe Creative Career Discord. Links are posted in the show notes, or visit adobediscord.com and click on Adobe Creative Career.